at Malibu's most luxurious beachfront restaurant. A quiet waitress named Emily served coffee with trembling hands. None of the wealthy guests knew she was the elusive billionaire heiress of Lancaster Industries. She wore thrift store shoes, wiped tables alongside college kids who barely noticed her, and moved through the elegant chaos like a shadow. But Emily wasn't there to make money or earn promotions. She was on a secret mission, one born of heartbreak, betrayal, and the raw need to find something real. She had come to discover whether love could exist without the influence of her last name. What happened next would shatter egos, spark headlines, and change lives forever. Before we begin, like this video and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring you more powerful stories. Now let's dive in. The sun had just begun to rise over the California coast, casting a golden hue across the sleek glass windows of Azure Sky, a restaurant famed for catering to celebrities, CEOs, and the ultra-rich. Inside, the scent of citrus-glazed pastries and fresh espresso mingled in the air as waiters adjusted their ties, managers rehearsed their smiles, and every surface gleamed like it had been polished by angels. Amid the morning bustle walked a young woman with soft brown eyes and a nervous smile. Her name tag read Emily, but that was only half the truth. Emily Lancaster, daughter of the late Jonathan Lancaster, one of Silicon Valley's most formidable billionaires, stood quietly in her crisp black uniform and discount sneakers. Her long hair was tied into a simple ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry, no hint of wealth. She looked like any other new hire hoping to impress management and survive the early shift. But Emily had no interest in performance reviews or corporate ladders. She was here for something deeper, something dangerous. 3 months ago, her engagement had imploded under the full glare of media scrutiny. She had discovered her fiancé had been secretly brokering deals behind her back, leveraging their relationship to gain access to her family's empire. While tabloids mocked her with headlines like "The Billion-Dollar Fool," Emily cried in silence. But instead of hiding behind the gates of Lancaster Estate, she made a decision. She would leave her castle and step into the real world. No security, no luxury, no last name. Just Emily. If love was real, it had to be found under fluorescent lights, not chandeliers. On her first day at Azure Sky, Emily worked the breakfast shift. She cleaned up broken glasses, apologized for mistakes that weren't hers, and endured snide chuckles from senior staff who called her clumsy. At table 4, a couple complained that she didn't refill their mimosa fast enough. At table 7, a man snapped his fingers and scoffed, "You move slower than my grandma." She bowed her head, smiled politely, and took it all, never letting them see how badly it stung. Then during the mid-morning lull, he walked in. He wasn't like the others. Tall, slightly rugged, with rolled-up sleeves and deep-set eyes, he carried no air of wealth or entitlement. He settled onto a stool at the counter, pulled out a small notepad, and began sketching something. Emily approached, expecting another dismissive glare or rude demand. But instead, he looked up and smiled, not the rehearsed smile of a salesman or suitor. It was quieter, sincere. "What's your name?" he asked. Emily blinked. No customer had asked that all morning. "Emily," she said softly. "Nice to meet you, Emily. I'm Ryan." She poured his coffee, her hands trembling just slightly, then turned away before her cheeks betrayed the warmth rising beneath her skin. But as she did, a senior waiter muttered behind her, just loud enough for Ryan to hear. "Don't bother with her, man. She's just a broke little nobody trying to play waitress." Ryan looked at the older waiter, then back at Emily, then did something no one expected. With calm, razor-sharp clarity, he said, "I'd rather speak to someone real than waste time with anyone fake." The silence that followed wrapped around the room like a storm cloud ready to burst. Smirks faded. Conversations died mid-sentence. Emily, still holding the pot of coffee, froze. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from something far more dangerous. Something like hope. She returned to the counter and began wiping invisible crumbs, trying to steady her breath. Most customers looked through her like furniture, but Ryan had looked at her, not at her name tag, not at her shoes, but into her eyes, and that terrified her more than any insult. She reminded herself to stay focused. This wasn't about catching feelings. This was about finding truth. Still, something in the way he said her name lingered, like a note she couldn't unhear. Minutes passed, then an hour. Ryan remained at the counter, sipping slowly, sketching on his pad. Every so often, Emily stole a glance. He was either drawing or watching the ocean through the window. Not once did he pull out a phone. Not once did he speak down to anyone. When his cup finally emptied, Emily returned, unsure what to say. "Would you like a refill?" she asked, her voice softer than intended. He smiled. "Please." As she poured, her eyes caught the corner of his sketch pad. It was a pencil drawing of the restaurant from his perspective, but in the middle, perfectly detailed, was her. Her apron, her ponytail, her hands gently pouring coffee. She nearly dropped the pot. "You drew me?" Ryan shrugged. "You look like part of the scene. Honest. I like that." Emily blinked. Her feet wanted to move, but her heart stayed still. She forced a smile, whispered a thank you, and walked away, her thoughts now louder than the chatter around her. Why had he drawn her? Why had he defended her? Did he know something? Was her disguise slipping? Behind the kitchen doors, whispers spread. Jealousy, curiosity, suspicion, all boiling beneath crisp uniforms. Megan, one of the senior servers, leaned toward another and muttered, "Watch this girl. She's hiding something. No broke girl walks like that." Later, as the shift ended, Emily found Ryan's empty cup and a folded napkin left behind. On its corner, a tiny drawing, a coffee cup, and the words, "See you soon, R." That night, Emily sat in her tiny rented apartment, far from the marble floors and guarded gates of Lancaster Estate. She stared at the napkin, wondering if she'd just met someone genuine, or stepped into another trap disguised as kindness. Her heart wanted to believe in him, but her past hissed warnings in her ear. She thought of her father, who once said, "The only way to know someone's truth is to meet them at your lowest, not your highest." The next morning, Ryan returned. Same stool, same calm energy. Emily approached, unsure if she was excited or afraid. But before she could speak, a sharp voice cut through the air behind her. "Hey, waitress," barked a man in a designer suit, snapping his fingers. "Get me a cappuccino, and make it quick." Emily turned slowly, her eyes narrowing. "Ain't deep." It was Marcus Bennett, the entitled son of a real estate tycoon and one of Azure Sky's regulars. He had ignored her existence for days, but now, for the first time, he noticed her, and not in a kind way. She tightened her grip on the notepad and turned to take his order, but Ryan quietly stood from his stool and began walking toward the confrontation. Yet, what happened next would test everything Emily believed about love, identity, and the power of being seen for who you really are. The staff watched, the tension in the restaurant thick enough to choke on. What Ryan did next wouldn't just define the morning. It would rattle every soul in the room. He stepped into the center of the restaurant just as Marcus's voice rose again, a cold, entitled bark that echoed off polished surfaces. The man tapped his watch with exaggerated flair, his eyes drilling through Emily as though she were furniture. Present a moment ago, beneath him now. "Do you plan to stand there all day, or do you actually serve people?" Emily held her breath. Her eyes dropped, hands stiff at her sides as she fought the heat rising in her chest. Weeks of practicing patience, of reminding herself that being treated poorly was part of the disguise, began to crack. But something about Marcus's tone, sharp, loud, laced with superiority, made her feel as if she'd been dragged back to a darker time. Back to when she was just another name to trample, another girl to silence. Before she could move, Ryan's voice cut cleanly through the air like a blade. "You should speak to people with more respect," he said, calm but firm. A hush fell. Fork stopped midair. Marcus turned slowly, incredulous. "Excuse me?" "I said," Ryan repeated, "treating someone like a servant because they bring your coffee doesn't make you powerful. It makes you pathetic." A few gasps rippled from the nearby tables. Behind the kitchen doors, one of the managers peeked out, unsure whether to intervene. No one moved. No one breathed. Emily stood frozen, her heart pounding, her feet rooted in disbelief. Marcus gave a short, disbelieving laugh and shook his head. "And who are you? Her boyfriend?" "No," Ryan replied, eyes steady. "I'm someone who believes that a person's worth isn't measured by the price of their shoes or the size of their bank account." The smirk faded from Marcus's face. He stepped forward, shrinking the space between them, but it was he who looked smaller now. Ryan's rolled-up sleeves and worn leather watch were no match for Marcus's tailored suit and Italian loafers. But in that moment, appearances meant nothing. Ryan turned to Emily. "Are you okay?" She nodded faintly, though her heart thundered in her chest. No one had ever stepped in like that. Not here. Not after everything she'd endured. The last man who claimed to care had used her name to climb financial ladders, trading her identity for his ambition. But this was different. This wasn't a performance. Ryan didn't know who she really was, and still, he stood up for her. The manager finally emerged, voice cautious. "Is everything all right here?" Emily quickly stepped in, voice steady despite the chaos inside her. "Everything's fine. Just a misunderstanding." Marcus scoffed, his pride bruised. "You're lucky I even come to this dump." With that, he turned and stalked out, muttering insults under his breath. The restaurant seemed to exhale as if a storm had passed. Emily remained still, the unused order pad clutched in her hand. Ryan returned to his seat without fanfare, taking a long, slow sip of coffee as if nothing had happened. She approached him, unsure of what to say, her voice softer than usual. "Thank you." He nodded, looking up at her. No one should ever be spoken to like that. Not here, not anywhere. She wanted to say more, but her voice failed her. Instead, she offered a small, grateful smile, then turned and walked back toward the kitchen. But the moment echoed inside her like a heartbeat. Something about it felt too real, too raw. She had spent so long building walls between herself and others, telling herself trust was weakness. Yet Ryan had slipped through a crack in that wall without even realizing it. Later that day, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, Emily stepped out the back door for her break. The salty breeze kissed her face. She sat on the concrete steps, eyes fixed on the ocean, hoping the waves might wash away the chaos in her mind. Footsteps approached. She didn't look up. Ryan silently handed her a folded piece of paper and walked away without a word. Curious, Emily unfolded it. Another sketch. This time it showed her, standing tall, holding her notepad with quiet strength. Behind her, shadowy figures laughed and sneered, but she remained still, dignified, unshaken. At the bottom, in small, neat handwriting, was a single line. "The world sees what you wear. I see how you stand." Her heart ached in a way she hadn't expected. She was supposed to be in control of this game, test the world, not let it test her. Yet here she was, vulnerable, shaken, clutching a pencil drawing like it was a lifeline. Emily barely slept that night. She kept staring at Ryan's sketch, her eyes returning again and again to that sentence. "The world sees what you wear. I see how you stand." Just words, just paper and graphite. But they held a weight she could not ignore. She'd come to Azure Sky with a plan, to stay hidden, to stay safe, to stay numb. But with each passing day, Ryan unraveled a piece of her armor. She had once told herself there was no one worth trusting. Now she wasn't sure if she even believed that anymore. By morning, she was at the restaurant before sunrise, adjusting place settings with unusual care. She smoothed every napkin, realigned every spoon, her hands needing the work to keep her thoughts from spinning out of control. Yingu. At exactly 9:07 a.m., Ryan walked in. He looked tired, like someone who had fought battles with his own thoughts all night long. He gave her a small, worn smile and took his usual seat at the counter. Emily approached with the coffee pot already in hand. "Rough night?" she asked softly. He nodded. "A bit, you?" She poured the coffee, lingered longer than usual. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. No longer tension, but something gentler, warmer. Then Ryan surprised her. "I want to ask you something." Emily tensed. "Okay. Would you like to have lunch with me? Somewhere that isn't here, just a walk. Somewhere quiet." Her heart pounded. This was dangerous territory. It blurred lines she had trained herself to avoid. But she wanted to say yes, not because of the sketch, not because he'd defended her, but because when she was near him, she felt seen in a way she never had before. She nodded slowly. "Yes. After my shift." The rest of the day passed like crashing waves. Fast, loud, disorienting. Her coworkers whispered. Megan watched her closely. Even the manager seemed to notice the lightness in her movements, the faint shift in her demeanor. Emily didn't care. For once, she wasn't pretending. She wasn't hiding. And that terrified her more than any risk. After the lunch rush, she changed into simple jeans and a soft white blouse. Outside, the sun cast golden streaks across the boardwalk. She found Ryan waiting. And they walked in silence at first, the sound of the ocean their only soundtrack. Then slowly, words found their way in. Ryan told her about his childhood, about growing up in a small Oregon town, about drawing because it made sense when life didn't, about his mother, who cleaned houses for people who never looked her in the eye, and how she taught him to see people, not just their roles. Emily listened, her gaze fixed on the horizon. And for the first time in years, she let pieces of herself slip out. She spoke of boarding schools, of always feeling out of place, of never knowing if someone liked her or the family name sewn into her life like a label. Ryan listened without interrupting. He didn't pry, he didn't guess, he simply let her speak. Eventually, they found a bench facing the water. Emily turned to him, her voice tentative. "Can I ask you something now?" He nodded. "If I told you that everything you know about me might not be true, would it change anything?" Ryan paused, then looked her straight in the eyes. "The way you treat people, the way you stood up under pressure, the way you listen, those are the truths that matter to me. Everything else is just background noise." Her breath caught. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, a voice rang out behind them. "There she is." They turned sharply. 3 men in black suits rushed toward them. Emily's stomach dropped. Security. They had found her. She stood up quickly, her entire body seizing with panic. But Ryan stepped in front of her. "Wait," he said, blocking the path. The lead guard hesitated, taken off guard. "Sir, we are under orders to bring Miss Emily Carrington home. Her father has been looking for her." Ryan turned slowly, facing her. The look on his face said everything. Shock, confusion, betrayal, but also something deeper. She froze. In that moment, the wall she had spent years building came crashing down. Everything was out now. Her name, her truth, and Ryan. He wasn't just curious anymore. He was a witness to everything she'd tried to leave behind.